who don't know me, my name is Amanda Dorenberg. I am the president of COMMB, which is the Canadian Out-of-Home Marketing and Measurement Bureau. And this is our first COMMB Talks event. I'm so pleased to announce this and to launch this event today. It's going to be a quarterly series that we host. And one of the really interesting components about this event is it starts by curated content that we push out to or via surveys. In this case, because we're talking brand direct, which is very exciting to me, we pushed out a number of surveys to the top out-of-home spenders in the space, and we got some incredible feedback coming through. And today we've got and my co-moderator. So first and foremost, I want to introduce my co-moderator. So Paul Briggs is with me. Paul, if you want to give a wave. Paul is the principal analyst for eMarketer Canada Insider Intelligence. And later on, he'll share some insights about the out-of-home industry. But first, we're going to meet our panelists. So joining us today from TELUS, we've got the Vice President, Home Solutions Community and Channels, Andy Balser. Andy, welcome.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for joining us. From Rogers Sports and Media, we've got the Director of Marketing for News and Entertainment Brands, Adam Bauer. Adam, welcome.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Thanks so much. We're excited. From Eighth Hill Beverage, Noah Gill. Noah, thank you.
Thanks, Amanda. Nice to be here.
Awesome. All the way from Florida, living a sunny South life right now, enjoying some sun. A little jealous. And I don't know if my internet cut out a little bit, but Kevin, happy you're here.
Sorry, I think it did. Hopefully it's yours and not mine. But nice to be here. If it was my internet, we'll blame it on Bell since we've got.
I thought it was mine. I thought it was mine. So I think we're in the same boat.
Okay, good.
I mean, we're virtual events. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you all for being here. We've got a great conversation. As I said, it's a jam-packed agenda today. We wanted to start this event first by having Paul showcase some insights and information relative to the out-of-home industry in Canada from eMarketer's Insider Intelligence. So Paul, happy to turn it over to you if you want to share your screen and give us some info.
Great, thank you, Amanda. Yeah, it is great to be here and to share our latest forecast for the out-of-home ad spending market in Canada. 2020 was quite a year in terms of what we saw across all advertising, not only digital advertising, but traditional, including out-of-home and digital out-of-home as well. We forecast ad spending for Canada twice annually, and we constantly update it. And last year was a really iterative process for us to look at what our pre-pandemic forecast had shown and what we thought might happen halfway through the year, and then what we are now forecasting to happen sort of a year later. So it's evolving, but I wanted to share what we found in a very short presentation, just to sort of level set on how big the market is and how fast it's growing and what we can see as key trends in the market going forward. So our out-of-home forecasting is part of our overall ad spending forecast for everything under the sun when it comes to advertising. For the pandemic, so our forecast in 2029, we had anticipated that out-of-home advertising in Canada would be the strongest traditional ad spending format in 2020. A lot of other traditional ad spending formats were kind of but we lost strength of home and digital role in the out-of-home, a growth advertising sector. But obviously we had to adjust our forecast, as I mentioned, right? So massively reduced 2020 investment, not only in place-based and outdoor formats, but also in all advertising formats. Overall, I'm jumping down to the bottom bullet now, but overall in Canada last year, our forecast showed that total media advertising dropped by 7.3%, which obviously is a reversal of pretty steady growth for the years preceding that. That 7.3% is kind of in line with economic performance. Like I think GDP in Canada last year was 5% and change, a decline. So the ad spending market is sort of reflective of what's going on economically overall. So it's not a surprise to see those numbers fairly close. But getting back to the play-based and outdoor formats, what we saw were lack of activity in all areas. So public spaces, of course, reduced foot traffic in downtown cores, sporting venues, the shutdown of the NHL, the Jays not playing in Toronto, you name it in terms of sporting events, all that being paused last year and this year is going to have an impact on out of home. Airports, big reduction in air travel. One stat that I saw was the biggest travel month for flying in Canada is August. And in August 2020, travel was down like 87% compared to the previous year. So obviously not a surprise there, but it kind of quantifies how much activity was lessened in airports and had an impact on the advertising market there. And then also cinemas as well. Closures of theaters and the delay of theatrical releases also had a sort of a depressing impact on the market. So what our forecast shows here is that, and this is from March 2021, so very recent. This year we expect out-of-home spending will be $710.3 million. That will represent a growth rate of 17%. So it's going to reclaim a good portion of what was lost in 2020. And then what we see moving ahead is double-digit growth for the next few years as the market continues to rebuild and get stronger. And a big part of this is the digital formats helping fuel that recovery. So what advertisers like about the digital formats and out of home is the flexibility they afford, the ability to turn off campaigns on a moment's notice if they need to, the ability to adjust messaging based on the sensibilities of a culture. If there's something that is topical, maybe messaging in a campaign is inappropriate. So the ability to adjust creative on the fly is also a very cool thing that advertisers enjoy about digital. So we see digital as a key driver of a recovery in the market. So that's all the content that I have to set things up. I'm going to stop sharing now and hand it over to Amanda.
Thank you very much. All right, so we're going to dive right into some of these questions. As I mentioned in the intro, this initiative started based on an idea that some of our members actually came to us with in understanding brand sentiment about the out-of-home industry, challenges, successes, areas of great success, that type of thing. So first and foremost, the survey that we put out essentially asked leading Canadian marketers about their perception of out-of-home, their sentiment of out-of-home. So I wanted to talk to you, my esteemed panelists, about your take on out-of-home advertising in the Canadian marketplace. And most specifically, I'm going to direct this question first and foremost to Andy, Adam, and Noah. I'm curious to know if you're currently using out-of-home in your marketing mix, and if not, why? So let's start with Andy.
Yeah, thanks. And yeah, certainly I think anytime that we look to do a campaign of any significance, out-of-home is always an element of that, in addition to TV, digital, radio and print. So there's certainly been shifts, I think, in the spend and the allocation as Paul outlined, but certainly for us, out of home is kind of one of the major pillars of media spend that we'd have for any major campaign.
I love it. Adam, what are your thoughts?
Yes, look, same thoughts as Andy. Any major campaign that we have out of home is always a consideration, especially, I look after the radio brands at Rogers Media, and a lot of radio listening happens in car. So out of home is a great medium for reaching people in car. So yeah, it's certainly something that is I would say, foundational on most plans that we look at. And, you know, our spend would indicate that over the last 4 or 5 years as well. How that's changed in pandemic times is interesting, of course. We have varied our tactics to reach people where they are, which is, you know, as we all know, especially like it is different market by market. But here in Toronto, where I'm based, we've seen shifts in our media allocations into digital and television and things like that to reach people in their homes more than out of their homes. But yeah, you know, when the good times return, it will all, I'm sure our plans will stabilize and look very similar to the way they did back in 2019.
No, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this topic, especially
we love the medium. Especially as like a urban focused brand. We love the ability to hit consumers on the street. But as a startup and a smaller CPG brand, it can be fairly expensive for us to play in. But it's definitely a major part of our strategy always. And we love the medium for sure.
So just to piggyback on the sentiment, I love that the sentiment is positive, and obviously we see shifts in sort of ad spends and allocations market by market as, you know, the pandemic evolves and we emerge from this. Are you considering how you're leveraging out of home with the onset of new data and new technology and emerging insights? Is that a big part of the plans that you're working on, particularly during the pandemic, being active in market? I'll open it up to anyone who wants to answer that.
I'll jump in on that. We've certainly looked at different out-of-home products that deliver exactly that, especially as the shift to, you know, people working from home has happened. We've looked at things like vertical impressions media, you know, elevator advertising and so on that actually captures, you know, the time spent looking at the ad unit within that format, and a lot of other different variations. Really, it's for us, absolutely, and the more data we can kind of access, the better, because I think it helps, you know, inform our plans for the future, which is always important as well. So yeah, we've definitely looked at and deployed some of those tactics.
I would echo that. You know, TELUS, like I'm sure all marketers represented in this call today, we're increasingly data driven in all of our decisions. You know, across mediums, and you know, for us, I think the more we can quantify the impact of a particular buy, the more, you know, and the more certainty we get around the outcome, the more likely it is we're going to spend with that. And I think we're very lucky to have our agency partner, the Greenhouse, be able to provide fantastic analytics in terms of what to expect, and I think we're able to complement that with some in-house insights as well. But you know, the more any medium can provide kind of certainty or confidence in outcomes, the more likely it is for us.
For us on Ace Hill, it's been a lot of our out-of-home strategy has been a little bit opposite. It's been more of a brand play and more of focusing on the markets and the urban centers where our consumers live, to really showcase our brand as a, you know, as a startup. You know, we don't do big GRP buys and have national strategies. So for us, it's been super local and a bit of a different strategy. But you know, obviously, any data that we can leverage to inform our strategies and make our campaigns better, we use. But for us, we use at home as a really great way to showcase our brand and successful.
Yeah, and I'll just quickly add in from an agency perspective across all of our clients. Obviously, there's been a huge emergence of mobile data and overall customer and consumer data. And so for us to be able to leverage that, especially during COVID, has been very key. We built out some tech to follow consumers on their journeys throughout the day. And, you know, to Paul's point at the start, audiences are definitely shifted. You know, we pre-COVID, we were in bars and restaurants and gyms and cinemas, campuses, arenas. And when all those things closed down, then it was really important to see what roadside was really hitting in the rural areas. We talked about, you know, Adam just mentioned, obviously residential networks. So there's been, we've had to certainly adapt in the last year and a half with this, but technology has been a huge key to help us do that.
I love hearing this. You know, shameless self-promotion. We're launching some new tools at COMMB in the coming weeks that will give us some really granular insights with respect to the effects of COVID on various different product types and across the country in a multitude of different regions. So I'm quite excited to announce that. And this is a great conversation. It feeds into where I want to sort of pivot. I want to talk about your favorite out-of-home campaigns. So I know we've got some slides that we're going to pop up here. And when you see your brands, just please jump in and maybe give us some connotation about, you know, what was the impact of this campaign and why it is your favorite campaign in out-of-home.
And
So,
Amanda,
Andy.
it's okay if my fellow panelists choose the TELUS examples as their favorite out-of-home campaign as well. Just so you know.
I love it.
But yeah, no, I think again we're really lucky. You have a great creative partner that's you know, brings I think some really impactful out-of-home to life in a number of different ways. So this again would be an extension of the executions that we'd see in TV and social and print, etc. You know, a few things that I think that you know I really like about you know, our creative territory as well as this medium is that just the critter-based approach. You know, you have a large oversized critter, you know, making eye contact. It's a really engaging creative territory that extends quite well onto an out-of-home space. You know, we're also able, even in a static sense, able to add some movement and quirkiness in the messaging and the imagery that I think comes off really, really well. You know, on the left-hand side here, that's Sassy Kathy is the name of that alpaca, and you know, clearly actually conveys a bit of personality with the main product message. You know, that we really like. On the previous slide, I think one of the reasons I wanted to choose our Beware of Cat example is because, like, in itself, like, that's a play off Beware of Dog, obviously, you know, in terms of protecting your home with smart home security. Beware of Cat was our kind of you know, whimsical take on that. But itself, like a Beware of Dog or Beware of Cat, it is a sign, right? It's a sign that you typically have on your house or on your property. So it adapted really, really well to the at-home space. And the agency team actually even took it one step further and even did reflective executions of this, so that at night you'd see the eyes light up and some of the lettering light up as reflective you know, applications that really made it pop both day and night.
It's amazing. Thank you. There's such iconic out-of-home creative campaigns with the critters, as you called them. I'm a big animal advocate. I mean, I've got my dog's portraits tattooed on my arm, so I have an affinity to anything that has an animal in it. So let's move over to you, Adam.
Yeah, look, for us, it's really all about creating impact and standing out. So here's two examples of a couple of our Toronto stations and a bottom one there in the Jack one. But like Roz and Mocha, you know, if you live in Toronto, you will have seen their campaigns around over the last few years. They're always looking to create impact, do something creative and something that just gets noticed. So the streetcar here is a great example of that, and our creative team internally does all this work, and they do an excellent job of really just working with the assets that we shoot, often to format. This streetcar here was part of a holistic campaign, and these stills were from the TV execution and worked out quite nicely. But you know, we're always looking for different formats or doing things like the extension on the Bus King here, just to really amp up the level of the impact that the out-of-home creates and allows the message to cut through. So, you know, we've had a lot of fun over the last few years looking at different formats and doing different campaigns across our you know, 52 radio stations across the country in every local market, and we try to use it as creatively and effectively as possible. The Jack campaign down below was a personal favorite, super simple, as you can see, but the creative team, our partners internally, had a lot of fun writing a whole bunch of different lines around the Jack brand and really talking to the people of Vancouver. And we've continued that campaign for probably 3 years now, and it's been really successful for us.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Noah, I love that we're switching gears a little bit here. We've got some amazing traditional posters and some static. So, talk about your affinity.
Yeah, with this campaign, like we started about 6 years ago as a beer company with one product. And this campaign was all about like saying, we're not just a beer company. We have drinks in different categories, not only beer. We have vodka sodas. We launched a hard kombucha last summer. So that was kind of the kind of antithesis of the campaign. It was to be a cross-category brand. And then minimalism in terms of the creative, like minimalism is in the DNA of our brand. We have really strong branding, so we kind of let the brand do the talking in a lot of ways. And you know, as a startup, we wear a lot of different hats. So all this creative and strategy is all done in house by a really small team of people. But you know, we definitely thought this campaign was really successful, and we have some out of home coming in market in Toronto this summer that you know takes some inspiration from this one.
Amazing. I loved highlighting some of these creative campaigns, and I just want to pivot quickly gears. There was a Q&A that was previously submitted that ties in very well to this creative content. So I want to throw this to the panelists. How important is it for brands to pursue a more creative approach to their out-of-home campaigns? And this is for anyone who's interested in answering.
You know, I'm happy to jump in. You know, I'm just a simple farm boy at heart, and like things very, very simple. When we look at a home, you know, I think we kind of you know, because we have a community-based approach at TELUS, look at, okay, if we're going to go into a small community, you know, how do we make our presence felt? And actually, out of home's a really great way to do that, right? It's a little bit different than if you have one of the, you know, kind of the large digital platforms. You know, maybe a TV provider or technology provider based out of Palo Alto, you know, serving you a digital ad in a smaller community in Canada. It's a lot less personal than when you're there physically, and having out-of-home advertising actually helps to convey, beyond the metrics, it conveys a sense of presence, I think, in the community that we really like. So I think one of the ways that we certainly look at it from a community lens is, you know, out-of-home to us means, okay, it's billboards, it's transit, it's the local hockey arena, it's the, you know, perhaps the sign at the farmer's market, etc. Trying to take a more of a community-centric lens towards, you know, what actually is at a home. You know, some of those that we'd own, like our vehicles, etc. And how do we actually leverage, you know, a really wide array of out-of-home presence in the community.
Amanda, it's funny you just asked that. We have a quarterly steering committee meeting where we have all of our clients direct on there. We kind of give them the latest and greatest of what's happening worldwide and what are some of the things that keep them up at night. And the first thing that came up in last week's conversation was creative and understanding creative best practices better in the out-of-home space, because a lot of these clients have said, you know, some of the struggles we have with our creative agency is that they replicate a digital ad and expect it to do well in out-of-home. And those creative examples that we showed were great because less is more in out-of-home. You don't want to have like a ton of text. You don't have a ton of wording. And so I think the conversation we're now having with the creative agencies on behalf of our clients is making sure they're doing the right distance testing, making sure that you've got the right color contrast, you've got the right content on there to be impactful. Because how many times have we driven by, we saw something and you have no idea what the brand was. And so, you know, we're all very passionate about the space. And so it's on us to make sure that our clients are getting the most return, the most footfall, the most, you know, increased sales. And so I think the creative piece hasn't been as big of a conversation, but needs to be. And if you do it right, it's going to have a huge impact on the brand.
That's amazing.
I'd add to that, you know, I think we all know that creative is a key driver of campaign success. And, you know, it's one thing to put your ads out there all over town, but they have to be noticeable and, you know, evoke some sort of emotion. So, you know, that's a big focus for us always is, as Kevin said, simplicity in the overall messaging and not putting too much on the boards. You know, logo size is always a conversation, of course. I don't think, you know, we're alone in that, but yeah, making sure that it's highly impactful and engaging, just fun to look at generally, is always a key consideration when we're looking at approving creative.
It's funny that you mentioned the logo, Adam, because we had joked and said, is it better to just throw up our logo on a board with no content whatsoever? Would it resonate with consumers more? Because you either have a really cool image and then you have no idea who the brand was, or does it make more sense to have the logo and the company logo and the branding more prominent with the message that you hope that they get? Because it's, how do you connect with that consumer sentiment? But
I mean, Noah, you guys are the kings of minimalism. So you just throw up that very recognizable A in your brand, and we all know that it's a delicious beer.
Oh, that's kind of like circles back to like, it's a major brand play for us, and stuff like grassroots we love, and stuff that really kind of hits our consumers in urban centers is the stuff that we really focus on. And we think you have, a split second to grab someone's attention. Minimalism with not a lot of copy generally works really well for us, especially as we kind of, we use targeting around LCBOs and beer stores that obviously drive sales. But, it's a lot of fun for us to think about the creative internally and to kind of bat ideas around.
it's such a great example, right? You have a giant can of beer on a board with a giant A on it, as opposed to having like a lifestyle piece or people enjoying a drink and sitting around smiling, and then you have a little A skill in the corner.
100%. And we've toyed around with like, a little more lifestyle, like, leveraging relationships in our community, whether it's chefs or bartenders, to help kind of sell that brand and that story and that lifestyle. But at the end of the day, at least for us, we really think that our brand is so strong that it resonates so well. And we're trying to create this iconic brand and affinity towards our logo. We really felt that kind of the minimal approach has really worked well for us. And it's a lot of fun.
I love it.
A lot of fun to ideate in a room with your business partners and
creative brainstorm.
Obviously drinking an Ace Hill at the same time. So it's a lot of fun.
Paul, I want to throw to you. You've got a really compelling question.
Yeah. I want to pick up on something Kevin had mentioned a little earlier about changing consumer behaviors and so forth, and what the impact of those changing behaviors will have on media strategy, specifically around measurement. The quantitative approach to measurement or something more qualitative. Has that changed at all in the last year, and how does it apply specifically to out of home?
Yeah, so a couple of things. I think we can't argue around the fact that the digital advancement during COVID has been obviously a necessity, and I think really there's probably been 3 years of innovation have been crammed into the last 14 to 16 months when it comes to how the way agencies and clients buy, whether it's programmatic or just standard digital insertion orders. And what we saw, the advantage of having that capabilities during COVID, and we've talked about it, to be able to switch messaging, turn on and off depending on these crazy lockdowns that we live in, making sure you've got the right message to the contextual piece in the right market. But we've also, again, been able to use a lot of technology to understand, okay, if we geofence this board, we have a consumer who was exposed to that ad, did it drive them to go into location? A lot of that is also transferable to the static world. And we truly believe that static is definitely not dead by any means. It's definitely going to, as these restrictions eventually get lifted, maybe in 2025 at this rate, but when the restrictions get lifted and we start to go back out, we view static to be still a very big component of out of home. But what COVID has taught us is that digital has advanced pretty quickly. And be able to create a lot of different tools and tech to be able to help our clients understand the effectiveness and really the efficacies of out of home. So
has it impacted sort of your approach to local and regional markets versus, say, a national approach? Are you trying to be more specific to cater to conditions in a certain province or conditions in a certain community?
Yeah, for sure it has, because even if you have a national campaign and a national branding that the idea is that it's running across Canada, we still have to take a localized approach. We've had to take a localized approach because of COVID, and so certain formats of media, certain markets that we should or shouldn't be running in, We've also seen clients be a lot more focused in the messaging to make it more market specific, to try to connect again with that consumer. We've seen obviously traffic has dropped off a lot in the VetCom markets, but if you look at, let's say like a Mississauga or Scarborough and Airdrie or some of these, regional areas, the traffic is still there. People want to get out, they want to do something. And it's just, leveraging that technology and understanding where those consumers are to hit them with the right message. And the creative pieces, making sure that we have the right message in the right market at the right time. But really the big thing for us is being able to turn on and off the ability to get into these markets based on the lockdowns, right? So you can't run after 8 o'clock in Quebec. You can only run, you're going to run very differently in Ontario than you will in BC. So that's just been a giant moving target throughout the whole pandemic.
I think just to add some commentary to that, we've certainly seen a shift in the VECTA markets where it's more localized, I would say. Like there's not a lot of distance traveling. We're more community focused and neighborhood focused. I mean, I live on the waterfront near the Chorus building, and there's this beautiful park throughout the winter where we were in like full on lockdowns. There's a skating rink that I'm not even kidding you. It's 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. open, and there's 50 plus people there every single day. The park is jammed. It's more about like finding creative ways where consumers are out of their home. It's just how have they adapted their behaviors to really accept and accommodate the lockdowns specifically. Sorry, Paul, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I know you've got another great question.
Yeah, no, I was just wondering if the other panelists can chime in as well around sort of localizing out-of-home messaging. Any other good examples from the group?
I think from our point of view, Kevin touched on it, but and you might have mentioned earlier, Paul, too, like our focus towards more digital out-of-home advertising has been a massive benefit over the last 12, 15 months. We were fortunate at the time when COVID hit to have had a fairly large portion of our out-of-home media spend in digital at that point as well, which allowed us to pivot off our music radio stations and onto our news radio stations and change the creative, within a couple of days of everything locking down at a time where consumers weren't really interested in listening to their favorite music on CHFI or KISS. They were seeking news and information. So we're able to stand up a campaign inside a week at that point and have it out there in market while things were still starting to shut down and people were figuring out what work from home looks like. So it was a relevant time for us to be in market with our news brands. And of course, layering in some other digital tactics along as part of that campaign period. But that certainly has been beneficial, and we've taken that approach across other brands at RSM as well. I look after our TV brands on City TV. So we've been using digital out-of-home to promote shows throughout the pandemic, as well as digital and social media as support around that. And that's given us a lot of great flex as things have come onto the schedule at a short time period, and we're able to get campaigns up and running pretty seamlessly and pretty quickly.
That's awesome. Really, really great commentary. Paul, do you have any follow-up questions on that, or do you want me to jump in with a couple more? You're on mute.
Yeah, go ahead, Amanda, jump in.
Awesome. What I wanted to sort of talk about is, we've been in this pandemic, and in Ontario, we've seen lengthier lockdowns than any area in North America. So it's certainly trying, and it's challenging from a consumer standpoint. It's challenging from an advertising standpoint, a branding standpoint, to really pivot and adopt new approaches. So I'm curious to understand, what are some really creative tactics that you're working into your marketing strategies? Like, how are you really targeting consumers in the out-of-home space? What additional data sets are you leveraging? Are you doing sort of combined omni-channel media mixes to really reach that 360 holistic targeted effect? And just very curious about the strategies you've employed since we're now, well over 12 months into this. Perhaps we can start with you, Andy.
Yeah, I'm happy to provide a couple of examples, maybe tie into some of the discussion around community as well. Like we have a fairly diverse business in terms of the lines of business that we support, from virtual healthcare to mobile phones to smart home security, list goes on. Well, one of the things we certainly do that's very geographically based is build fiber to the home networks. And as you mentioned, Amanda, people are out and about, but they tend to be in their neighborhood more, where there's not always a ton of out-of-home opportunities. Right? Out-of-home tends to be on highly trafficked corridors in the downtown cores, but if you drive around a suburban neighborhood, there's not always a whole lot of out of home, sometimes some TSA, etc. So we've certainly tried to take a kind of a quasi experiential approach where the construction crews are out, they'll get branded, they'll get their sandwich boards out as well to try to kind of offset or mitigate some of the lack of out of home in those suburban or residential areas.
I like it. We just had a question pop in into our chat here, and the question is specifically relative to the national advertisers. Are you currently exploring or looking at new ways to incorporate some of the growing markets, such as London or some of the smaller regional markets across Canada, versus just focusing on the VECTA markets? Is that a part of your tactical strategies to really embrace the community side of things?
I'll jump in on that from an agency side. So I would say yes, for sure, probably now more than ever. And I think if you look at the markets outside the major markets now, so a market like London, this is now the time, obviously, to be looking at markets like that, or even smaller markets, assuming that the inventory exists in the marketplace. So we talk about constraints in the marketplace. There's some markets where out-of-home inventory is very limited or sold out. But I think now would certainly be the time, because what we've noticed is that people are obviously staying closer to home. They're staying in their homes, and whether it's residential networks, whether it's just inventory in small markets, now is certainly the time to be looking at it. And I also think it's going to have a more sustainable part of the, at least seat at the table, because even when COVID is no longer a thing, I think what we've learned is that a lot of us can work from home and be a lot more flexible. And so there's going to consumer pattern and path to purchase is going to look very different coming out of COVID than it did, say, right before COVID. And so those smaller markets will play a bigger role. And we know that a lot of the media partners are starting to develop more inventory there. So for us anyways, it's absolutely on our radar.
So I have a follow-up question. One is partially from a secondary question that came in through our comments here. Is there a certain thing beyond the insights that COMMB is currently providing? So our measurements, our methodologies, our upcoming new data releases and insights towards the latter half of this year with respect to audience profiles and circulation, impression, data, screen, and spot level impressions that would make your brands plan or purchase more out-of-home campaigns? Again, this is an open question. It's a bit of a loaded question, I think. I see Adam, you pondering this one.
I was thinking we could start talking about rate, but maybe not.
It's not the right forum.
Right, no. Yeah, it's a really good question. I think the more that all of the data sources can connect to each other would I think probably help us understand customer journeys better, and then be able to leverage each of those different platforms or tactics, whatever you want to call them, collectively. So it's a tough question to answer, but I think the more of that we can do, and connecting from from the campaigns that we're running on social media to any out-of-home data to addressable television, audio streaming, whatever, the more we can put all those data sets together and build a fully fleshed out sort of customer journey and understand the segments within those audiences, the better so anything out of home can bring to the table in that regard, I'd say we're definitely open to it.
Yeah, Amanda, in one word, it would be attribution, right? Which is exactly what Adam's just obviously talking about here. So that's the big thing that we've seen for sure. So, you know, we have clients saying, I spend all this money in out of home. How do I know it's effective? How am I know I'm getting a return? So to be able to build models to understand, you know, what the true ROI is, and how that works on multi-platform, whether it's mobile, whether it's addressable TV. We built a lot of stuff to answer a lot of those questions during COVID. But I think attribution is the biggest thing. Just again, understanding I spent this much, how much incremental footfall did I drive? How many more downloads did I get for my app? You know, how many more people saw my TV spots? So again, leveraging the mobile data. Just really quickly, we've got an automotive advertiser who throughout COVID actually got us to geofence all their competitive dealerships. So looking at all the brands that they compete with, we looked at all those device IDs in those dealerships. We follow the macro movement patterns of those customers throughout the day so we can serve up creative as we see a high concentration of them, but we also would then get a ranking of the highest postal codes as to where these competitive people are. We would then work with our addressable TV partner to hit them with addressable TV messaging too. So that all ties back into the attribution method or knowledge, and that is probably going to be a huge sector coming out of COVID.
Yeah, so a lot of cross-media mix and omni-channel. Andy, I'd love to hear from you with your strategies with TELUS.
Yeah, maybe just to build a little bit on what Adam and Kevin already covered. Attribution's key. The thing I would encourage all the out-of-home organizations to think about is that there's a pretty interesting window of opportunity right now, right? With some of the changes to cookies that are coming in the digital space. There's some uncertainty with what's going to happen with targeting, especially call it cross-platform targeting in digital. And you know, while that uncertainty kind of increases, if on the out-of-home side, you're able to actually increase the attribution and data insights there, like that to me seems like a pretty good recipe for success as a media buyer. So that's one. I would maybe challenge the group to think a little bit about how can you take advantage of that opportunity. I think the other thing is some creativity in the executions as well. Like I don't know, like I'm a sucker for a good billboard extension. You know, kind of like Adam showed on the bus examples as well. So you know, that's one. You know, moving billboards that are attached to vehicles, those are another ones. You get to break down you know, municipal bylaws to make some of that stuff work. But the more we can kind of get creative and get noticed, I think is you know, one big area that would certainly want me to spend more on out of home. The other one is, I think, you know, it gets back maybe to, you know, combining those two a little bit, the attribution and some of the creativity. But like the more you can demonstrate that, hey, by you know, putting up out of home in a community, you improve other media performance, right? Like you have a billboard, you get a better click-through rate, you better get a better conversion rate, you get a better recall rate of your digital advertising. The more you can demonstrate that attribution, not just of the out-of-home asset itself, but how it supports and drives performance through other media buys. That would be the other big, you know, insight. I think that you would make me want to you know, work with our agencies to look at our mix.
Yeah, I have another question regarding, it follows really this idea of increased digital share of overall out-of-home buying. I'm wondering, part of that is programmatic buying of out-of-home inventory as well. And maybe Kevin, I'll address this to you on the agency side in terms of, you know, where do you see the share of buys being done programmatically versus direct over the last couple of years? Did the pandemic increase it or decrease it? Where do you see programmatic fitting into out of home in the future?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So, you know, if you're looking at home, you've got classic and static, you've got digital, and then you have programmatic digital. And really for us, the programmatic digital is when you're overlaying custom audiences, you're leveraging mobile data, you're really following consumers on a journey, and you've created these custom audience segments and you're activating against that. I think digital and programmatic is definitely going to continue to grow we are getting into more of a digitized world, whether we like it or not. And over the next 5 to 10 years, a lot of those static assets are going to convert digital once they can get, you know, the CapEx approval internally to make that investment. But I think, you know, for us, it all depends on if a client wants to do something really custom where they're leveraging first-party data, third-party data, creating custom audience segments. You know, if we have a day parting to it, if it's weather-based trigger, depending on who the client is, that all these different programmatic layers that we're applying we've had, I would say probably for us, 70% of our digital activity has been programmatic as opposed to just running, a spot in a loop 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So our clients are becoming a lot more data centric and data, I wouldn't say a smarter approach, but just more refined with it. But to answer your question, it's definitely not going anywhere. I think we have to embrace it, but we also don't want to lose sight of static because it still plays a really big role as part of the overall mix. So it's working. It's getting that fine balance of getting both of them.
Yeah, I think that's a great sort of segue. I mean, we recently published COMMB, an article in Forbes that spoke to the value of static out of home in the digital era, and it's such an important component. There's a great tactical way to include these, omni-channel out of home strategies that include static, traditional, large format, transit, digital, programmatic digital. It's really about, looking at the KPIs. No, I wanted to sort of loop back with you as sort of the independent brand on the panel. So I'm really curious to hear what you're most excited about and what your biggest opportunity is that you see for the brand.
Well, overnight in COVID, we lost a large portion of our sales because the way we built the brand was through on-premise, which was bars, restaurants, events, and really a direct way to kind of get liquid to lips and get people engaging with our product. So we're really excited for things to actually open up, that we can actually start seeding our product into those venues. We had Porter Airlines as a partner and big music venues that we lost kind of overnight. So it was a really amazing way for us to talk to our consumer as a local brand, as a small brand. So really excited for everything to open up and us be able to engage with our customer directly, which we haven't been able to do. And the other side is, it allowed us to really focus on the retail side of our business, the LCBO, et cetera. So, there's a big opportunity, once everything opens up to leverage not only bars and restaurants and events, but to leverage all the work we've done on the retail side to kind of, for both those, marketing strategies to work together. So,
You're sort of working that retail activation component because
exactly, yeah,
everybody's going to the LCBO.
You've been to one of our parties. We're a very experience-based brand, and for us, a lot of our strategy really went into trade marketing. What are we doing in the LCBO to drive direct sales and liquid to lips? So we're really excited for bars and restaurants to open, and the alcohol business has changed a lot in terms of the regulations of what you can't do. So there might be an opportunity for us to go direct to consumer as well. So there's a lot of exciting stuff that's going to come when the COVID winter is over. But it's created a lot of opportunities for us to strengthen other parts.
Noah, can you throw a party for everybody on the call when this is all done? Okay,
100%,
cool.
100%.
His parties are wild.
Well, it's almost happy hour, so I hope everyone's drinking an Ace Hill.
Maybe
For
we can
sure.
take some questions from attendees at this point. The first question that I'm seeing is, how can brands take advantage of the return to normalcy with out of home, given that people are eager to go outside post lockdown? So this is sort of relates to what Noah just mentioned about the COVID winter coming to a close, hopefully sooner than later. So how are brands reacting to that? What kind of creative impulses might you try to tap into as people get outside?
That's open to anyone.
I think yeah, sorry, Andy, go for it.
Oh, thanks, Adam. Yeah, I was going to say, I think we're going to have a bit of a regional approach. There's urban versus rural versus suburban. There's going to be different dynamics at play. Paul, I think your initial graph that you showed is that the return to normalcy is going to be prolonged. I don't know that downtown Montreal, Vancouver, or Toronto are going to have office workers return to the same degree that they were anytime soon, right? So that's going to change, certainly human traffic patterns. So as people kind of get back outside, get traveling again, maybe get back in the movie theaters, I think that, I would expect us to start to shift our spend towards those areas. But, it feels like, looking into the crystal ball, a lot of that's going to be gradual versus a switch being thrown, at some point later in the year.
Yeah, I'd like to think that it's all going to turn out like the extra ad that we probably all saw in the last week or so, when everyone running outside and going crazy and coming back to normal. But I think Andy's probably right. It will be a slow roll and it will be different in various regions. I think probably the key is, in my prediction would be that you need to be out there and out in market, because media is going to be hard to get once everyone does come back. There's going to be a rush from airlines and tourism industry and all the rest of it to try and snap up whatever is available. So I'd say start planning. We certainly will be looking at it. It's hard to have that crystal ball and know when exactly is the right timing, but it's a bit of a gamble anyway, in the way we always approach it. So I think that'll be no different, but there will be a big rush back to a lot of different media channels. And I think some of the more traditional ones will see a lot of interest.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. There's one question. I'm cognizant of time. I keep checking our timer. I respect everyone for being here, for joining us. We've got 7 minutes left. There's one question that popped into our chat, which indicates, do media buyers look to purchase digital out of home in specific postal codes with specific demographics, or how are you really strategizing around your audience segmentation?
Yeah, so I'll jump on that. So short answer is yes. I think certain demographics and postal codes would be part of the level. So if you're working with like an Environics Analytics or something like that, where you've overlaid specific consumer data or a certain target group, and maybe there's certain inventory within that postal code, that might be an interesting approach. But then also really, again, understanding that consumer journey and again, that path to purchase and how those people move from those postal codes is equally as important. And again, that can be used for both static as well as digital.
I'd echo that. It's probably the movement that's more important, given the placement of where the out of home tends to be. And I know the Greenhouse, our agency partner, does a great job at being able to bring that insight, like who's driving by the out of home sign, when, and what's that demographic. So I think we would certainly target more on the demographic basis versus the postal code. Like, those two things are obviously interlinked, but it's the travelers, the passers-by, that we really try to focus more the analytics and insights around.
Yeah, there's another question that got popped into the Q&A box from an anonymous attendee. The question is, in the past 14 months, has the out-of-home platform moved up the ladder in terms of priority in planning and media placement, say over radio, digital, or TV? Anybody want to take that one?
Yeah, so I would say yes and no. Yes, in the sense that there's been a lot more innovation that has come to the space, and no, in the sense that there's still client fear about, there's this perception that nobody's outside, right? And out of home is just, it's not there, which is not the case. I mean, people are outside, they've just changed and they've moved. And yes, the overall numbers are down, but not to anywhere near to the degree of what people think that they are. So we're battling this. We're battling this for sure, in the sense that the perception is not as good as it was going into COVID, but the innovation that has occurred is definitely going to make the space stronger once life returns back to whatever normal looks like.
I think that's a great segue into one. We have 4 minutes, so I'll squeeze in one final question, maybe two, if we have time, before thanking everyone for joining. Just again, sort of with campaign budgets sort of largely skewing towards various different media formats, how are you guys predicting the outcome of this? Are you going to be focused? I'm actually going to blend the two questions because there's a question that just popped up. Are you going to be sort of blending and marketing with a heavier focus on CSR and community, or are you going to really be looking at consumer audience segmentations, or will it be a combination of the two? And I'd love to hear from the brand side, if it's possible, if you guys have an answer for that.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's kind of a combination of the two, and it depends on the brands and the market from our side of things. It's, yeah, that's certainly something that we always look at, but it's probably more and more evident in the current state and coming out of the current state. So yeah.
Andy?
I think, yeah, on the TELUS side, we have a long history of giving, too numerous to list them all. But just during even the COVID, pandemic, we've given more than $150 million of either dollars or contributions to communities, organizations to help, whether that be those fighting the pandemic on the front lines, whether that be the most vulnerable citizens that are being affected by this, and giving them free discounted internet and technology so they can stay connected to education and family, etc. So certainly when it comes to community giving, that's been long been part of our DNA, and one that we are increasingly focused on. And even post pandemic, we've just evolved even our brand promise to let's make the future friendly. So it's actually more of a participatory statement with customers in terms of we're giving, and we're trying to give alongside of our customers back to those communities as well.
Noah, what are your thoughts on that?
Like, we are all about community. That has built our brand, and it can be our DNA forever. We actually donate 1% of all of our sales to environmental causes. So we do work with all sorts of community-based not-for-profits like David Suzuki and the Water Keepers, and community will be a major part of our strategy moving forward for sure.
Kevin, do you have any final thoughts on that?
No, I think what the brands are giving back to the marketplace and just the community is great. I think one of the things I would just go to echo on it, the out of home, I'm super excited, obviously, for as these restrictions get lifted. Ideally, it times it well with good weather. I think out of home is poised. Adam made a comment that there's going to be lots of inventory that's going to get scooped up. There's a lot of we're open messaging that's going to be there. There's going to be a lot of safety but fun, right? And so we had talked about what are those messages when consumers return. But I think the out of home, assuming again that we're flattening the curve in this third wave and things start to open up, out of home is really poised for a massive bounce back. I'm a little bit biased, but I truly believe it.
I'm with you there. So just closing remarks, gentlemen, thank you very much for participating in this. Andy, Adam, Noah, Kevin, it's been a pleasure. Your expert panel insights have been fantastic for us. We have recorded the session. Any questions that we did not get to in the Q&A, we'll follow up by email with an answer to when we distribute the content. Paul, absolute pleasure having you co-moderate this first COMMB Talks with me. So thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm really grateful for your time, everyone. Thank you, everyone who attended. We had a fantastic showing of participants. So really appreciate this, and everybody look forward to more COMMB Talks to come. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thanks, everyone.